The journey toward becoming a higher man does not begin with addition. It begins with subtraction. It begins with the courageous act of letting the false man die. This false man is not some external enemy. He is the carefully constructed version of yourself you built to survive. He is composed of approvals, expectations, and roles you inherited without question. He is the voice that says, be strong, but never vulnerable. Win, but never feel. Be admired, but never truly seen. He smiles when he wants to scream. He conforms when his soul wants to rebel. He performs when his inner life begs for truth. And because he fears rejection more than emptiness, he clings to the image, not realizing it is killing him slowly. To let this false man die is to enter a sacred fire. You must watch your masks burn, one by one. You must endure the terrifying silence that follows when you no longer know who you are without applause. In that silence there will be no one to perform for, no one to impress, no identity to protect, and that is precisely where the real man begins to take shape, not from desire but from necessity. He arises not as a concept but as a presence. He speaks not from the mind but from the marrow. The death of the false man is painful because he has become familiar. He has served you in times of fear. He helped you survive, but he cannot help you transform. He is loyal to safety, while the higher self is loyal to truth. To choose truth is to lose the crowd, but to find the center. It is to walk into the dark forest where no path is visible, trusting that something ancient within you knows the way. The higher man is not louder, more dominant, or more successful in worldly terms. He is deeper, quieter, more rooted. He no longer needs to convince anyone of who he is. His very being speaks what words cannot. To become a higher man is to declare a holy war against everything false within you, not by attacking it, but by no longer feeding it. Let it wither, let it ache, let it crumble. The man you are destined to become is waiting beneath all that you are pretending to be. And he will not arrive until you make room for him. So let the false man die, not once, but again and again. With each death, a new layer of truth is born. And in that becoming, you do not rise above life. You become life itself. A man may build his body like stone, command a room with presence, conquer goals with discipline, and yet remain hollow. He may be praised for his achievements, envied for his dominance, even feared for his power. But if his soul has been abandoned, his strength is fragile. Without soul, strength is armor, not essence. It protects, but it does not transform. It can endure, but it cannot illuminate. When a man chases power without inner depth, he becomes a vessel for anxiety. His victories are loud but fleeting, and his confidence is easily shaken because it is built on comparison, not connection. He may appear unshakable to the world, yet crumble in the quiet moments when no one is watching. The applause fades, the followers sleep, and in the silence, the questions begin to whisper, what am I really serving? What am I truly made of? Strength without soul cannot face the shadow. It flinches when confronted with grief, shame, or fear. It postures instead of processing. It dominates rather than dialogues. And eventually, it turns into performance, a show of masculinity that hides the aching truth that something essential has been lost. The soul is not weakness. It is the center. It is the compass, the origin, the breath behind the blade. A man connected to his soul knows when to act and when to yield, when to speak and when to remain still. His power is not a defense mechanism. It is an extension of his essence. He walks into the world not to impress, but to express what is real in him. He has faced himself in the darkness and no longer fears being exposed. His vulnerability becomes strength because it is honest. His silence becomes a weapon because it is rooted. His eyes carry the weight of inner battles won, not just external trophies earned. This is a strength the world cannot give or take away. A man with soul can bend without breaking, rage without destruction, lead without control, and love without losing himself. His strength does not rely on how much he can lift, but on how deeply he can descend into his own truth and return with light. In a world obsessed with appearance, his depth becomes rebellion. In a culture that rewards performance, his presence becomes power. Without soul, strength is noise. With soul, it becomes music, and only the man who chooses the inner path will ever hear that song and live it. Transcendence is often misunderstood. Many believe it means rising above, escaping, becoming untouchable by the chaos of life. But real transcendence is not escape, it is integration. It is not floating above your suffering, but sinking into it with open eyes and coming out the other side transformed. It is not about rejecting your pain, your shadow, or your flaws, but folding them into your wholeness. The man who tries to escape himself fragments further. The one who integrates becomes vast. To transcend is not to detach from reality. It is to embrace it in its totality, light and shadow, beauty and terror, sacred and shameful. Every part of you you've tried to exile, the rage, the sadness, the confusion, the fear, they are not mistakes, they are messages, they are pieces of your truth, buried under layers of judgment and fear. The man who seeks only the light becomes blinded by it, but the man who walks into the darkness and claims what he has abandoned returns with gold. Integration is the deeper work. It requires courage, not to conquer, but to feel. It asks you to sit with what you have run from, to breathe with the discomfort, to listen when your instinct is to silence. It demands that you look into the mirror not to fix what is broken, but to understand why it ever broke. This is the descent before the rise, the roots before the tree. You do not transcend your shadow by ignoring it. You transcend it by standing in it long enough to learn its language. When you integrate, you become many things at once. Strong and soft, focused and flowing, fierce and forgiving. The higher man is not clean cut. He is complex. He contains contradictions. He knows he is capable of both destruction and creation, and he chooses, consciously, to serve what is sacred. His power comes from knowing every room inside himself, and still choosing to live from the center. The world will tempt you to bypass this work. It will reward performance, mass squaring, spiritual shortcuts, and shallow enlightenment. It will tell you to rise above, to stay positive, to just move on. But transcendence that skips the wound is not transcendence at all. It is denial dressed in wisdom's clothing. Real freedom doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from inclusion, so gather all the forgotten pieces. Call home the parts of yourself you learned to hide. Look into the depths, not to be swallowed, but to understand. The man who integrates becomes unshakable, not because he is untouched by darkness, but because he has made peace with it. He no longer runs from the storm, he is the eye of it. And in that still center, where all opposites are held, the higher self is born, not as something distant, but as what you've been all along, waiting to be remembered. There is a kind of man whose life is shaped entirely by what hurt him. His choices, his fears, his beliefs, his very identity become reactions to old wounds. He defines himself not by what he's called to become, but by what he's trying to avoid. And in doing so, he remains bound to the past, chained to the very pain he wishes to outrun. But a higher man lives differently. His vision is older than his wounds. It existed before the betrayals, before the rejection, before the shame. It is deeper than any trauma. It is not born of survival. It is born of destiny. Wounds distort vision. They cloud the inner eye with doubt, bitterness, and fear. They whisper lies, you'll never be enough. You must prove yourself. You can't trust anyone. And if a man listens to those voices too long, he builds a life not from purpose, but from pain. His goals become compensations. His relationships become reenactments. His strength becomes armor. His achievements become distractions from the truth that he has never fully seen himself outside of what was done to him. But there is something beneath all of that, something primordial, something ancient. A knowing, a memory of who he is beyond his wounds, a seed that was planted long before the world told him who to be. This vision does not scream, it waits. It speaks softly in the silence, in the dreams, in the aching hunger for meaning that refuses to die. It reminds him, you are not only what happened to you, you are what you are here to become. That call is not an escape from the pain, but a context for it. It reveals that the wound was not the end of the story, it was the beginning of the awakening. When a man's vision is older than his wounds, he does not use pain as a compass. He uses it as a teacher. He no longer asks, "How do I protect myself?" but "What am I being prepared for?" He stops performing for validation and begins aligning with purpose. He stops seeking revenge and starts seeking revelation. His eyes turn from the past to the horizon, not to forget what came before, but to place it where it belongs, behind him. The past has shaped him, yes, but it does not own him. He walks forward not as a victim or a warrior, but as a vessel. He carries his scars like symbols, not shackles. They mark where he's been, but they do not decide where he's going. His soul remembers something deeper than pain, something he came here to do, to build, to embody. That is his North Star. That is his fuel. That is his vow. To live with a vision older than your wounds is to step out of the loop of reaction and into the path of creation. It is to live from the deep instead of the surface. It is to trust the inner blueprint more than the outer chaos. It is to become a man not driven by fear, but drawn by meaning, and in doing so, the man no longer asks life to make sense. He makes sense of life. He no longer begs for healing, he becomes the healing. He no longer waits for permission, he remembers the assignment, and that remembering is the beginning of everything. There is a fire that lives within every man, not the fire of anger or impulse, but something much older, much deeper. It is the fire of becoming. It is the heat of transformation, of inner truth demanding expression. But this fire does not serve you. You must serve it. It cannot be controlled, manipulated, or bent to your ego's will. It burns away all that is false, it tests, it purifies, it calls you not to comfort, but to aliveness, and the man who has the courage to kneel before this fire, to devote himself to it without resistance, does not merely warm himself by it. He becomes it. The fire speaks in symbols. It does not shout, but it never stops burning. It shows up in the ache of longing, in the restless hunger for something more, in the deep discontent that success cannot soothe. Most men try to silence this fire. They drown it in routine, numb it with pleasure, bury it under responsibilities that are not truly theirs. But the fire does not forget, it waits. And when ignored for too long, it erupts as crisis, midlife collapse, failed relationships, a sudden emptiness where once there was ambition. This is not punishment. It is initiation. The fire is calling you home. To serve the fire is to choose the path of devotion over distraction. It is to give up the illusion of control and listen, truly listen, to what your soul has been trying to say beneath the noise. It is not a path of safety. The fire will demand sacrifices. You will lose things, approval, certainty, the version of yourself you've been taught to protect. But in return, you will gain something far more sacred, your essence. The real you, not the constructed self, but the elemental one. This path is not grandiose, it is quiet. You will not always be understood. Others may think you've lost your way, but only the man who has dared to lose the world can find his own soul. And in serving the fire, you begin to embody its qualities. You become radiant, fierce, honest. You no longer have to explain who you are. Your presence speaks it. You no longer chase power, you carry it. You no longer fear endings because you have learned to rise from ashes. The fire you serve transforms you, slowly, thoroughly, from the inside out. You do not just act with courage, you become courage. You do not just seek truth, you become incapable of living a lie. You do not just survive change, you are change, and like flame, you bring light where there was none. You expose what hides, you warm what is cold. You ignite what is sleeping. There is no higher destiny than to become the flame, not to burn others but to illuminate them, not to consume but to awaken. And this can only happen if you are willing to serve first, to surrender, to trust what burns, to let the fire do its sacred work in you, until there is nothing left but light.